Hey guys, so today I'm here with a tutorial on how we can make text inputs with tags. Now what I mean by this is that you can see on the screen is that I have a text input or a, input text field here with my cursor, and before it might have some tags. Right now it's populated with PHP and Python. And what I can do is when I'm typing something, so for example if I say JavaScript, I can press the tab or enter key to create another tag. And this is great because on some websites where you need to be able to tag something, or if you're sending like two messages, and you need like an array or an object of inputs that you need to use, tags is a great element to achieve that. So, and also with the ability here, you can see with these little X marks, we can delete something, or we can similarly press the backspace key on our input, and it gets deleted as well. So we can put whatever we want in these tags, and they get added to this input here. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to do this. We're going to be using AngularJS for this project, and hopefully you'll learn something by following along. So let's get started. So now before we get into writing any code, I want to go over our approach and how we're going to create this tag system. So you can see here in the browser, I'm within the text input field, and I'm going to create a tag here. So I'm just going to say, just press tag. So now we can go in the Chrome inspector, and I'm going to actually take a look at what this tag looks like here. So you can actually see that what appears to be a text input is just actually a div that's styled to look like an input field. And in that input, in this div here, we have our tag, and then after that we have our actual input text field here. So what happens when I add another tag here, so we're going to start typing here another tag, and I press enter, for example, you can see that another div here gets added to this text input here, and our actual input field, which is styled to be quote-unquote invisible, moves along to the end. And when we press backspace, for example, to delete one, this div gets removed. So the way this actually works is that in AngularJS, in our controller, we have a model or an object that is keeping track of these tags. And we're actually using a directive inside of this div, which is using the ngRepeat directive to loop through these tags that we have in our controller. And anytime we press tab, after writing something here, when we press tab, one of these tags gets added to the model, and then ngRepeat, the wonderful AngularJS stuff that provides us with, automatically adds that tag to our input. So now that that's discussed, let's get into writing some code. Alright, so let's take a look at the structure and the way this is set up here. So I have my index.html file here already set up, and the only thing I've done so far is that I've included jQuery and Angular from Google CDN, and I have another file down here called tags.js, which is right here. And the only thing that I have so far is I've created an Angular app called tags app, and I've created a controller called tags controller. And they're linked up here in the index.html file. So up here we have our ng app, our tags app, and then we have in our body element here our ng controller. And then we also have a style.css file up here. And the only thing there is right now is a reset CSS, and we've just included 20 pixels of padding for our body element. So if we go to Chrome, we can just see that we have an empty document to work with. So let's get started by actually creating our fake input. And so we're going to do a div here, and we're just going to call it, let's say, tag input container. So Let's style this to make it look like a fake text input. So we called it tag input container. And let us start out by giving us some border. So let's do 1 pixel solid CCC. Let's do some padding. So we'll do 2 pixels on the tops and the bottoms, and then 3 pixels on the left and the right. We have to make the display. Let's do inline block. And let's do a width of 500 pixels. Let's do a border radius of 3 pixels. Make it look pretty, and I guess we can do a box shadow. So box shadow. I'm kind of copying this actually from Bootstrap's text to input. This is how they make theirs look all nice and pretty. So I think they do 0 pixels here, 1 pixel at the top, 1 pixel at the top, and then they do an RGBA of, and then I think their opacity is something very faint. So if we refresh our page, we don't see anything, and that is because why exactly? Ah, there we go. All right, that works. So now let's do our actual input field here. So let's just do an input type of text. And let's style this here to get rid of the browser's actual CSS here, because right now if we refresh this page, what you'll see is you have this another input inside an input, which is what we want to avoid. So what we're going to do here is going to do tag input, and then we're going to have an input, selecting our input element here. And now we have to do a couple of things here. So first, we're going to do display inline block. Now what this does is, because we're going to have multiple elements inside of our parent div, so we have to make it act like an inline block element. And we also have to float it to the left, because we're going to have a bunch of elements which are also floated to the left. So let's do a height here of 18 pixels. Padding is 0 pixels. Margin, actually we need that. Let's do a font size of 13 pixels actually. Line height 18 pixels. Let's go down here so you guys can see this. Just do black. Background color, we can leave that alone. No border. And let's just do a margin actually of 2 pixels. We can give ourselves some space. Now the other thing you have to do is, so we can save this right now, but if we refresh the page, you can see that when we highlight it, we're still going to get that ugly outline that some browsers do. So what you have to do is you have to do a tag input, and then on the focus style, you have to set the outline to 0. And just to be safe, let's just do box shadow 0 pixels as well, in case there's something else that's messed up. So if we go back to Chrome here, we refresh, and now we can see we have an empty input field to work with, which is great. So now we can actually we're running into our first problem now that we have to fix. So as you can see, this input field we have here is created, but like if I go past a certain width, the actual width of the input field is met, so it's going to do this weird thing where it scrolls back. But we have, at least 400, 500 pixels worth of space to write in. So what we actually have to do is dynamically increase the width of our input field, our text field here, as we start typing. So what we're going to do is actually go into our index.html, and we're going to make a directive on this input here, and we're going to bind it to an attribute. So I'm going to do data, and then we're going to do tag input tag input. Alright, so let's just do like that. So in our directive, what we're going to do here is actually we're going to make a directive here. So we're going to do app.directive, and we called it tag input, I believe. Yeah, tag input. And then we're going to do function here, and in a directive we're going to return an object, and we're going to restrict it to an attribute, and then we're going to have our link function, which takes in the scope, element, and attributes. So just to see this is working, let's just do console.log hello to see what we are doing here. So let's refresh this. Let's go to the console. Alright, so we're good. We see our hello down there, and that means we're golden. So let's go back into our linking function. So in here, we're actually going to do we're going to keep track of our width. And we're going to watch changes into our input field, and then work on those changes. So actually what we have to do is a couple of things to our HTML here. So what we have to do is create an ng model. So let's name that tag input. Alright, let's do, tag text. We can separate our, because we're doing something tag input. So tag text. And then we're also going to need to be able to change our style. So we can do data ng style. And actually, the reason I'm using data in front of it is because for HTML5 compliance, you can actually just leave them as ng styles, but it makes me feel safer and all fuzzy inside when I just use data-ng style. So what we're going to do here is, I believe the syntax is like this. So we do with, and we just check that really quickly. Yeah, and then we're going to bind it to something let's call it input width. So if we save that there and then go back into our directive, we can just do now to change that width, we can just do scope dot input width. Let's just set it to 20 pixels for now. So now what we have to do is we have to watch for changes in width, or in the text field. So we do that by using scope.watch, and what we're looking for here is our attributes, and we're going to look at the ng model. So because remember we named an ng model here called tag text, which is actually representing the value inside of that element. So we're going to watch that model, and on changes, so we have a function here. We're taking the new value of that changed model, and then we are going to say, alright, if the value is not undefined, because at the beginning it will be undefined, we're going to try to find the width of that input. Now the only way you can do that is actually there's a bit of a trick involved. You can't just take the width of that input field because we're defining it ourselves. So we have to actually extract the value that's in there, create a new element, a temporary element with that value, find the width of that, and then we can use that. So let's look how that's done here. So we're going to create a temporary element. So let's just call this temp L. And then we're going to make a span element. So let's do span. And then we're going to tag along here our new value. So then we're going to then end the span here. And then we're going to append it to our body. So the next thing we're going to do here is actually set the input, our scope input width, to the width of this new span element. So we're going to do scope dot input width equals temp L dot width, and then we're also just going to add 5 pixels of spacing, because just as a little buffer there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to remove this newly created element from the DOM. So hopefully if this all works, we can actually refresh our page now, and we have our created element here. And just to see if this is working, we can actually inspect, just do this, inspect element. Can go inside our div here and look and notice on the right here our element style. If we keep typing, we can see that that our input field is increasing in size. So that's good, because now we have the feel and of an actual input field, but we're kind of faking everything here. Alright, so now let's start into actually putting these tags into this whole thing here. So I'm going to go in my app controller here, and I'm going to do on the scope, I'm going to create something called tags. And I'm just going to set it to an empty array here. So what I'm going to do now is in my index.html file here, I'm going to do, before this input field, I'm going to do an ng repeat. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a div, and we're going to do data ng repeat. And we're going to do, we're going to need the key, you'll see later, and we're also going to take this as a tag. And then we're going to do this in, I believe we call this tags. Yeah, we call it tags. Actually, just for clarification, let's call this input tags, just so it, in our input tags. Yep, all right, everything's good, seems good there. So what we're going to do inside of this ng repeat is, actually let's just give this a call it input tag. So what we're going to do inside of this div is we're going to display the tag name. Now we're going to define that ourselves. And then after this, we're going to have another div which has the little delete icon thing here. So let's type this, make this delete tag, and then we are going to use, I believe that thing that looks like is called ng times, or at and times there. So let's style this here. So we're going to, we call this tag input cdn. We did its input tag. Scroll down here, input tag. Just give you guys more room so you can see this. Alright, So we're going to give it some padding, 2 pixels on the top, 4 pixels on the left and the right, a line height of 12 pixels, font size of 11 pixels, background color. Now let me see, I figured this out already before we did it. It's E3EAF6. Okay. And then as we did before, we have to do display inline block. We gotta float it to the left. And let's just do a border radius of 2 pixels. And then let's just give it some margin so we can separate these things. So let's do 2 pixels on the top, 5 pixels on the right, 2 pixels on the bottom, and 0 pixels on the left. So, and let's also style that delete tag div we created. So I believe just do input tag and then delete tag. That's what we called it. This also has to be display of inline block. It's font size of 12 pixels. Cursor is pointer when we're hovering over it, and the padding 0 pixels on the top and 2 pixels on the sides. Now let's also just use the hover so we hover over it. Just gonna change the background color. So, and I also figured this color out before, and we did 96B4 D2. You can honestly use whatever colors you want, but these are the ones that I just picked. So let's save that there. Now what's cool is since we bounded this using ngRep to our input tags, what we can actually do in our controller is just to test this. We can create one of these input tags. So we can do scope.inputTags.push to add a new one to the stack in this array here, and then we have our name. So let's just say test tag. So hopefully if this all works and it's bounded, if we refresh this, we are probably getting an error somewhere. Item in collection. Oh, I used the wrong type of brace here. No, did it again. This should work. So you can see here we have a test tag. And obviously I can't do anything yet because we haven't added any functionality, but that tag is there already. And you know, if you add more tags onto this array here, let's just call it another tag and we refresh this, you can see we have 2 tags in our input field. So this is one thing that I really like about Angular, your separation of your data and then your views and your DOM manipulation here. And it's it's a really easy way of being able to add and remove things. Alright, so we're almost done here. The only thing I've done now is just add a little border to these tag elements. And the only thing we have to do is now bind or have a thing so that whenever we type here, we press tab or enter, a new tag gets created, and have the ability to delete these tags as well. So what we're going to do is in our directive here, we're going to bind two events. We're going to do key down, function and element here, and then we're going to bind a key up as well. A little note about these things is, as you can see in this code, I'm mixing in, Angular as well as jQuery things such as append to or with. Um, Angular does come with JQ Lite, which is a lighter version of jQuery, but I'm not too sure whether or not it includes things such as being able to get the with or appending to. So that's why we included in our HTML file the full jQuery thing, so Angular has access to that. But anyways, so we're going to go back down to here. We're going to have our function and pass the event in. So we have bounded these two key down and key up things to these functions here. Now the first key down thing is, so we have the ability to press the tab key to go and add a tag. Now the issue is the actual default behavior for a browser is when you press tab, it goes to the next input element. So what we got to do is prevent that default behavior. So I'm going to do e.which equals 9, which is the key code for tab, and we're going to do e.prevent default. And then just as a safety precaution, we're going to do the same thing here in the key up. But actually, I'm just going to change this a little bit. I'm going to actually get the key here. I'm just going to do e.which. We don't need that. And then we're just going to do if key equals 9, or the key equals 13, which is the key code for enter. So let's just do tab or enter pressed. So we're going to prevent the default from happening. So what we're going to do now is if these two keys are pressed, one of these two keys are pressed, we're going to call a function in our controller to add a tag. So we're going to do that by doing scope.apply, and we're going to actually call a function which we defined in our HTML. So we're going to do attributes. Let's call this new tag. So we're going to go to our HTML file here, and then we're going to do data new tag equals add tag as a function here. And because it's up in the tags controller scope, we can actually go to our controller here. Let's delete these, and we can go scope dot add tag. That's what we call it, add tag. Make that equal to a function. So what we're going to do here is we're going to see, okay, first, if the length of, what do we call it? We called it tag text. So if the length of tag text is greater than 0, we are going to, actually, just for clarity, let's just do this. We're going to make this, if it's equal to 0, we're just going to return. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to add to our input tags based off of what our text field is. So we're going to say scope input tags dot push. We're going to push onto the array here, and then we're going to make a new object in here. Remember that name element we had before, and then we're going to say scope dot tag text, which is the value of the text field. And then we're going to finish it by just saying scope.tagText is set back to an empty string. So hopefully this will all work. We save this here, make sure our bindings are correct. That seems to work. It looks good. So let's refresh here. So we have an empty field here. So if I say a new tag and I press tab, you can see that we have a new tag created and our text field is empty again. So let's just do like another tag. We press tab, or I can do the same thing by pressing enter, and you can see that our tags are now created. Alright, so now the final thing we have to do is have the ability to delete these tags. So what we're going to do now is on the key down bind, we're going to have a thing that looks at the backspace. So what we're going to do there is if the key equals, I believe 8 is the one for backspace, we're going to call another function using the same method as scope.apply and attributes. We'll call this delete tag. So we're going to go back into our HTML here. We're going to have data delete tag. Let's call this delete tag. And then we also have to have the ability to do it as well in our little X marks here. So we're going to do data ng click equals delete tag. But we'll also have to pass in the key of our array here, so represented in that input tags right here. So now we're going to go back to our controller, and we're going to have a method here called scope dot delete tag. I believe that's what we called it. And we're going to set it to a function, and we're going to pass in a key. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have an if statement here. So if scope dot input tags length, so we're going to first checking to see if the length of our tags array is greater than 0, and if the scope dot tag text length is equal to 0, because you can type something and then delete it, but it has to be 0 to be able to delete the tag before it. So if it's equal to 0, and finally if our key is undefined, so the triple equals undefined, we are going to simply scope dot input tags pop the last one off the array. And then else if the key is not undefined, we are going to scope dot input tags splice based off of our key that element there. So if we save this and we refresh our page, unexpected token on line 18. Oh, whoops. Should be an equal sign there. So now, hopefully this will work. We have our, let's say, new tag. Say another tag. If we press backspace, you see we deleted that tag. And I can still keep typing here, and it won't delete that one until I press backspace again. So let's say tag 2, and if you press these X's here, you can see that that tag also gets deleted. And with that, that concludes this tutorial on how to make a tag input with AngularJS. Just a quick disclaimer, this is the method that I came up with if you know how to be able to do this, but I'm sure there's other methods out there. And of course this can be added onto. So for example, if you want to make this more look like Bootstrap, you have to, when they highlight it, like a little border appears around this text input. Or also, one other thing that I didn't mention is like since this little input thing is so small, you should technically be able to click anywhere on this input to be able to put focus on that. But you can, do that pretty easily. Um, but in a future tutorial, I'm going to be extending this tags to be able to include autocomplete with a little drop down based off of some predetermined data that you can have as tags. So look out for that tutorial in the near future. But other than that, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. And please, if you have any criticism or comments, put them down below, and subscribe to my channel for more programming tutorials like these. Thanks a lot.